So that's that. And speaking of MicroStrategy, let's look at a couple more things. This is an interview with Saylor. I don't know when this is from, but he's the same kind of strategy for companies, for people, the same kind of thing. It is. I think we're going to look back one day and just be totally blown away with what Saylor has managed to do. So we're going to watch this. I'll share some numbers that I came up with for my daily Bitcoin journal this morning, and then we'll keep going.
They normally just use bonds, and bonds are credit. They're crumbling, and their capital structure is crumbling. It's like you built a building in a swamp. You don't see buildings stand for 1,000 years built on a swamp. You have to actually have a firm foundation. An example of that is my company. So my company had that $600 million of cash that was generating 0% interest, and our stock was dead money. Nobody wanted to buy it, and then we were like worth $120 a share. We actually converted to a Bitcoin standard, and we started buying Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin kept going up in price. And in 44 months, our company went from a $600 million enterprise value to a $25 billion enterprise value. And they normally just use bonds. And
so they went from a $600 million market cap, to, he said 25 billion there. This was an old interview. I think they're closer to 50 now, 50 billion, by going on a Bitcoin standard. That's it. They didn't release any new products. They didn't hire a bunch of people. They didn't spend a whole bunch on marketing to try and get new customers. Nothing. They just bought Bitcoin, and they've become incredibly successful with that strategy. So they're holding 250,000 Bitcoin. So let me bring up some of the numbers that I got. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because, again, we don't need this to become a micro strategy. This is just more about Bitcoin itself, actually, though, and it has to do with public companies who are going to be buying Bitcoin, and that's why I called this "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet," because nobody's really here. Nobody's really in Bitcoin yet, other than MicroStrategy. So let's look at, I'm just going to bring this up quickly here, the math. I don't want to make sure I get it right. So I asked Claude, our faithful assistant, last night, how much the top 100 public companies have in their treasury reserves. So Claude said that he doesn't have any up-to-date information, but as of August 2023, about a year ago, the top 100 public companies had about 50 billion. I think it was 54 billion in treasuries. And treasuries are made up of cash, short-term securities like GICs, guaranteed securities. GICs maybe not, but something similar to that. Very, very liquid. And government bonds and corporate bonds. That's what makes up these corporate treasuries. So $54 billion worth. And yesterday we talked about the fact that Microsoft said that companies should have at least a 1% allocation to Bitcoin. So that 1% of 54 billion would be 5 billion, which would get the top 100 companies 70,000 Bitcoin between 100 companies. 71,000 between the top 100 if they all put 1% in at today's rate. So keep in mind that if this happens, it's probably going to go a little bit higher, and they'll get less than that. So if the top 100 companies, public companies, put 1% of Bitcoin or their treasury into Bitcoin, they would end up with 70,000 Bitcoin. MicroStrategy has 250,000 Bitcoin themselves. So that's what we're kind of seeing right now. We've seen MicroStrategy come from like the 1,000th ranked to like the 500th ranked to the 200. And I think they're already inside the 200. And once they get the top spot there, they're never letting go of that. Nobody's ever going to be able to catch MicroStrategy. And if you understand the importance of that, if you believe that Bitcoin is going to be the next world reserve currency or the measuring stick for every asset on earth, think about how much that's going to be worth as a premium. That's why we're seeing this happen right now. And everybody's confused about it because they don't understand what's happening here. They just think that it's kind of a bubble, but it's not even close to where it should be yet, because we haven't even gone through this bull run yet. Imagine 250,000 Bitcoin doubled if the price went from 70 to 150 in the next year, which most people would say is a very conservative guess. The equity in that company is going to be pretty high. The market cap is going to be very high at that company. So you also have to consume that as more and more filings come out saying that, Microsoft, Apple, Meta, NVIDIA, GameStop, these are all companies adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. Think about what retail is going to think about that. Think about what the institution, the pension funds, the state pension funds, every fund is going to think when all these companies, all these top 100 companies are adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. The price is going to go up. They're going to get less of them. And then at that point, that's going to take a while. I would say a couple cycles probably till all these public companies realize that they need to have some allocation. They get 1%. But then what happens when Apple comes out and announces that they're going 10%? Do you think Microsoft and Meta are just going to sit there and let that happen? Or are they going to try to get 10% themselves? And this is just corporations we're talking about here. So to me, this is kind of my summary on it. I said, number one, no one's going to catch MicroStrategy. Number two, hold on. This thing disappeared on me here. Got to make sure I'm giving you the right info here. Okay, where's the full post? All right. So number two, the corporate game theory alone here, setting aside the retail, setting aside the institutions, setting aside the countries who are going to be buying and mining Bitcoin, the corporate game theory alone is going to send the fiat price of Bitcoin into the stratosphere. And number three, this is going to take a few cycles to play out. And we know what happens every Bitcoin cycle. It gets harder and harder to stack Bitcoin. So, and then at the end I said, and then you factor the other 30 million corporations in the world. So we're just talking about the top 100 here in the world, but there are 30 million other corporations who will be adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. And there's 30 million corporations. There's 21 million Bitcoin. There's about 2 million Bitcoin available on the exchanges right now, and which will be less than that. Like when you look at this stuff very objectively with just math, very simple math, very simple economics, you just objectively look at this, you understand that $70,000 US is a rounding error. And so, I mean, for us as retail investors, what does that mean for us? It's like, well, yeah, you're going to be buying, you bought some at 50, you probably bought some at 60, you're going to buy some at 70. Don't, mess around too much trying to maximize what price you're buying at. Just fucking buy some. Because again, $70,000 is going to be a rounding error, not only in a couple of years, like in 10 years, but in a couple of years from now. So don't worry what price you're getting at. If you're here now and you're buying Bitcoin right now, you're so far ahead of everybody. You're front running Apple, Microsoft, Meta, and NVIDIA, and every country on earth. You're front running everybody when you're buying Bitcoin right now. So it's exciting. It's very, very exciting.